Looks like lots of folks on Zoom today. I'm guessing stuff is starting to go around. It is about the time in the semester where people start to get, but before pandemic, we used to affectionately just call it the crud. But obviously at this point, we don't want to joke around about stuff, so. There we go, cool. So Zoom folks, if you are sick, I appreciate you protecting everybody else by zooming in. So few things, and other folks may be rolling into. I am going to try to check y'all off without calling out names, and I think I can finally do it. Woohoo. Okay. So you may have seen, I just put in the grades this morning, but I graded them yesterday, that your exams are graded. In general, folks did pretty darn well. Definitely better than when I do them in class. So I think that is going for the assigned purpose. Okay, so we had 10 people who got A's, 11 people who got B's. Nobody got a C, nobody got a B. And then a few F's, a couple F's, and a couple people who just didn't do the exam. That happens sometimes. All right, so our average without the zeros was an 86. Pretty happy with that. Our average with the zeros is a 79, which is still pretty good. A lot of times when we write in class exams, we aim for somewhere around a 75 average. And I'm always happy when it's higher than that, honestly. So good to hear that y'all are doing well. I'm gonna pass these out at the end of class just because more people might roll in, and that way I can pass out as many as I can. I'm very willing to meet with folks individually to talk about questions you might have about the exam, things along those lines. Good morning. My biggest tips for y'all are to read the directions. And I know that sounds silly, and you're like, we know how to read, right? We're in college. Good morning. But I think that a lot of folks ended up just kind of rushing through and missing some things. So, for example, when you got to the explain it to the media quiz questions, right? It says answer one from each of the following sets. So one from set one from set two, one from set three. Most people did that. Some people answered both from each set. Some people didn't answer a couple, 2 or 3. So again, making sure you're reading the directions. And if they're not clear to you, asking me before you leave the day I pass out the exam, or shooting me an email and I can clarify for you as well. Same thing happened over here with the short answers. It says only answer one of 2. And I would say a third of you answered both. This time around, I graded the one that you did better on for benefit of the doubt. In the future, I'll just grade the first one you do, whether or not that's your better one. So make sure that, again, you're reading directions. This is on me. I think I need to clarify the directions on the what do I miss. So I will try to rewrite those for next time. But what I meant by the what did I miss is what did you study? What did we learn that I didn't have a question about on the exam? And then give me your knowledge, basically. So again, that's partially on me. I tried to give people credit where credit was due. But don't just give me a word, tell me about it. So some people, for example, were like, I wish you would have asked about detecting deception and listed all the ways to detect deception. Thumbs up, 5 points. If you just said, I wish you would have talked about detecting deception, you didn't get the full 5 points, if that makes sense. Some people were talking about stuff they just wish I taught about, which like a lot of that we're getting to later in the semester. So I tried to put little helpful notes. So again, this is on me. I tried to give as much half or, full credit as I could, and I will clarify those directions for next time. The other thing is to just make sure you're reading all the way through. There were a couple people who just missed this entire back page, right? So make sure you're looking at everything. You've got at least 48 hours, depending on, when the exam falls to do it. So give yourself time to breathe and look things over. Things along those lines, because like a lot of people didn't even answer the extra credit question about what room we meet in. Like y'all could have gotten +1 for that if you hadn't skipped it, right? So that's my biggest comment on this, is to just give yourself time to breathe and really read those directions and ask questions if you have them. That's why I have the exam distribution day as a day. I'm just going to sit in here and answer any questions that you have. Just because I want to make it as easy on y'all as possible. So, but yeah, in general, folks did awesome. I'm really happy with these scores, and we will keep doing the take homes because hopefully they are then a more accurate reflection of what you're retaining rather than what you can just sort of memorize and spit back out. And again, reminder to you that these are open book, open note, open my PowerPoints, open anything posted on Blackboard, open Connect. So use those to answer. Oh, one other sidebar with that. A couple people would like leave a multiple choice question blank if they didn't know the answer. Again, A, you can look it up, right? But also B, guess, because then you've got a 1 in 4 shot as opposed to a 0% shot of getting that point. Questions about the exam. You'll probably have more once I hand them back at the end of class, but just anything in general that's standing out to you right now. And again, this is awesome. I'm super happy about this. And if you're in the B range and would rather be in the A range, I think if you, kind of like give yourself a little more breathing time next time, you'll get there. And we did have, I want to say like 3 or 4 people who scored 100 with the extra credit. So good for y'all. Alrighty. So today what we're going to do is to keep talking about gender. And the way we're going to do this, on your syllabus, I had put something about doing another activity about who's in psychology. I realized when I looked at it, we were kind of duplicating what we had done for the history of psych section. And plus, I already have these really nice discussion questions. So these will just be your activity for the day. And we might not get through all of them today, which is totally cool because we have Wednesday that's also scheduled for this topic. Real quick, before we dive into this too, actually, let me take a minute. Today will just be my administrative stuff day. And let's look at your infographic project real quick, just because coming up, I want to make sure I get the date right for y'all. On Friday, you have your topic due for that. So I want to make sure y'all know what you need to do for the topic. And also that the project itself is clear to you. So let me go ahead and do my 2-factor authentication here. I guess they're rolling this out to y'all this week. So have fun. It's so much fun to have to get a text to sign in. Let me tell you, I know it's safer. It's just annoying. All right. So and you go here, I have a whole section of Blackboard for your myths infographic. And just to remind you the premise, let me bop to the syllabus. This is what we're doing instead of a final exam. So what you are going to do is to take a popular myth in psychology related to some psychological information, and you're going to create an infographic explaining why this myth is inaccurate. So both here on the syllabus and posted in your myths infographic section, I have somehow found the PDF to this entire book. This is probably illegal, but I'm not going to make you buy the book. So, just don't tell anybody. We're potentially violating copyright, and I won't go to jail, and I can keep teaching you. It'll be fine. If someone else posted it on the internet, I'm just reposting. But this has a bunch of different myths in psychology. Let me get to. So like this is a common one, right? People only use 10% of their brains. This was like the whole premise of a action movie with Scarlett Johansson, right? Brain scan studies show this isn't true, right? You put someone in a brain scanner, they're using their whole brain. It's lighting up, right? So, this gets into, the history of it and things along those lines. You are not stuck with these 50. If there's another myth you know about psychology that's not included here, you can definitely use that. You can Google around for other myths in psychology. I just thought because I found this, I would share it with you all. So what you're turning in for Friday is the myth itself. So just if in this case, it would be people only use 10% of their brains. And then you're going to have 2 pieces of information that show your myth is incorrect. So that can be from your textbook, or it can be from other sources that you've found. And, reputable sources could be a journal article, but it doesn't have to be that. If you find like a New York Times or a Washington Post article talking about it, that's fine. That's a totally count for this. What we're looking at is dispelling that myth. So you can either write that as a paragraph, or if I were turning it in, I do it in bullets like myth. We only use 10% of our brains. The second bullet point would be this study or our book says that you actually use this % of your brain, and there's research to back it up, and one other bullet point saying something like that. So this is just to get you thinking about the project and starting to read about your topic. And then throughout the semester, you'll turn in other stuff to get you ready for it. So you'll have an outline in about a month, and then you'll turn in the actual infographic at the end of the semester. And the reason I'm having you turn in these different steps is not only so that you don't save this till the day before it's due, right? And you're like, oh shoot, I gotta find a myth, but also so that I can give you feedback and I can say, this is a great myth, but here's something you might want to look at for your infographic for other sources of information. As we get closer to the time, we'll talk more about how to do an infographic. I haven't posted them yet, but I do have links to places where you can make an infographic for free. So I will get those in here in the next month or so. And again, this is just a nice way to think about psychology in a critical thinking, constructive way, and not have to do a huge comprehensive final exam. I don't know. I hate grading them. I'm sure y'all hate taking them, right? Even take them, that would be a little bit of a pain. So that's what's due Friday, and you turn it in right here on Blackboard. So if you click on this, it'll give you space to turn it in. The only thing I will say, I don't know why Blackboard is set up this way, but if you haven't encountered this, just give you the heads up. In order to actually, if you're not going to upload a file, if you just want to type into Blackboard, in order to actually do it, you have to click Write Submission, and then it gives you a box. If you put it in the box that already shows up, the comments box, when I go to grade it, my screen kind of looks like this, but then there's a sidebar where I like put in your actual grade, and it squeezes everything you wrote into that sidebar if you put it in the comments. So either upload a file or put it in this right submission. Again, I didn't design Blackboard. If I designed Blackboard, there'd be a button for comments, not for right submission, but you know, what do I know? I'm just someone who works with it every day. Who knows? Sorry, too much sarcasm this early in the morning. All right, any questions about that? Cool. Alrighty, so what we're gonna do for these questions is just sort of informally chat about them in between. So let me go ahead and pop this back into a slideshow. And what you'll do is just kind of group up with people around you. You're not gonna like formally write down answers or anything like that. You'll just talk about them with a small group, and then we'll just talk about them as a class. Folks on Zoom, there are a lot of you actually, so I'm gonna go ahead and stick you in. You'll be sort of bouncing in and out of breakout rooms so that you can chat about it. If there were only a couple of you, I was just gonna have you all type in the chat, but I think that'll work better. And so this is our first set of questions. So according to studies, positive body image is related to greater sexual activity and higher sexual satisfaction. So again, group up with the people around you and say, why do you think this is a case? And then sort of a secondary question to this is, do you think people who have plastic surgery to enhance how they feel about their bodies experience greater satisfaction in their relationships, and why or why not? Hang on just a sec here. For folks on Zoom, I'm going to copy paste this into the chat so you'll be able to see it after I send you to the breakout rooms here. And for each question, we'll just do a couple minutes of chatting through everything. So people in class, you can go ahead and start grouping up, and people on Zoom, I'm going to get you assigned to a breakout room in just a minute.
Is this still in chapter 11?
Yeah, this is all the gender stuff. Sorry, and I just realized the breakout rooms are right in front of the question now. There we go. Alrighty. So it sounds like there's some quiet here. And I'm going to bring back our breakout room folks. And I'm going to adjust the breakout room settings once we get these folks back here so that they don't have to wait 60 seconds every time to get back. Alrighty. So one group is mostly back and the other group will be back in the next 20-ish seconds. So that's good. That probably means they're chatting, which is awesome. Alrighty, so we'll just wait the 20 seconds so that they can participate too. Alrighty, so now everybody is out and I'm just gonna do this for 10 seconds, which will be a lot better. Okay. Okay, so why do we think, and folks on Zoom, you can feel free to unmute or you can type stuff into the chat if that works best for you. Why do we think that it's the case that people who have better body image have higher sexual satisfaction?
Like the way your body feels, how you look, your confidence is gonna be higher. So like, when you're insecure, you're not gonna wanna go and have sex with someone.
Yeah, you might be focusing on your body too much, right? Did folks come up with anything else, or is that kind of it tracking with what everyone else came up with? Yeah, and in fact, this goes back to Masters and Johnson, we talked about in the motivation chapter. One of the things they talked about is what they called the spectator effect, which is sometimes when we're trying to engage in, intimate time, sexual activity with our partners, we will end up getting so in our own heads that it's like we're watching ourselves rather than actually like living in the moment. This happens in a lot of areas of our lives, but can be most problematic in this area. And it's called the spectator role because it's like you're watching yourself and you're just scrutinizing your body the whole time. Lorraine says in the chat, they're comfortable with their body and more confident. Yeah. And so then you don't have to have that spectator effect when that's happening, right? You just end up being in the moment, enjoying yourself. And Cindy says, because they're more confident or maybe their body has such a significant factor that that's the only way they know how to communicate with others. Yeah, and hypersexuality. We are in a very hypersexualized culture, as we talked about already when we looked at body image stuff and the ads we looked at on Friday, right? And so it's hard to take yourself out of that, particularly when you're engaging in an activity that is itself very sexualized, right? And some of us, unfortunately, get any ideas we have about what sexual relations should look like from movies, porn, things along those lines, which is obviously not always accurate. And so then we're thinking our body should look like that. What do we all think of the second question? If people have plastic surgery to enhance their body image, do you think that they would have greater satisfaction, and why or why not? Yeah. Yeah, there are those folks, right, who the disorder sometimes they're diagnosed with is something we call body dysmorphic disorder, where they keep seeing things wrong with themselves even after they've been corrected with surgery, or even if like everyone else around them is like, what are you talking about, right? Yeah, so there are some people who just aren't satisfied with the surgery. What are other thoughts about this?
It just depends on the person. Just, I think some people get plastic surgery because like not in a self-downing way, but like they're like, oh, I just like kind of want to get this and I like it and I think like I look a little bit better with it. But then I think some people get it because they see what's wrong with them. So I feel like it depends on a person on if it even makes them feel better or not. Because when you just try to fix yourself all the time, you're never going to feel satisfied.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. For some people, it's empowering, right? You get, like you said, one little thing done that's always bugged you and you feel great. And for other people, it's just like your insecurities don't go away when you get that surgery. I remember a really heartbreaking episode of MTV's True Life where there was a woman who wanted to be a stripper and she was too scared to do it. So she got breast implants because she thought that would make her more confident. And they just showed her like after her surgery, fully recovered, sitting in her car crying because she like still didn't have the confidence to go do it. Right. And so, yeah, for some people, it's just, that's not the fix you need, right? Maybe you need some therapy. Maybe you need to, address things in other ways, talk to friends. Melissa in the chat is saying people with plastic surgery probably do experience greater satisfaction as well because they've enhanced something made to their liking, therefore increasing their body image. Yeah. And possibly their sexual activity and satisfaction. Yeah. So if they, exactly what we're saying in here, if they like it, if they feel like it's good, if they feel like this was the one tweak they needed, then it can really make a huge difference for folks. But it's, it's not cosmetic surgery. But one of the things I did in grad school that I'll talk about when we do our health psych chapter later in the semester is I worked with folks who were undergoing bariatric surgery. So people who were getting what we used to call stomach stapling and is now called gastric bypass, gastric banding. And they were like convinced that if they got this surgery, they just wouldn't want to eat anymore. And so a lot of what we did is work with them and be like, no, your hunger drive will still be there. How are you going to change your lifestyle to support your body after this surgery? Because particularly if you get the gastric bypass and you eat things you're not supposed to, or you eat too much, you can get really, really sick. So a lot of our jobs was like education and support to help them succeed, right? Because you don't want to spend all this money and go through a major surgery and then nothing works, right? Yeah. All right, so here is the next question. And again, we'll copy paste it in the chat for our Zoom people. So a family, peers, school, and the media, which of these possible sources of gender role association has the greater influence on the development of sexual identity? So this would be sexual orientation, but also your just self as a sexual being, gender identity. And do you think this might be different for people in other cultures? Why or why not? And so again, I'm going to put people into breakout rooms and folks in person can start chatting.
It's what influence it has on society. Yeah. So I think like family has that effect either in a bad way or a positive way, and I think media the same thing.
Alrighty, I'm going to bring our other folks back here because it sounds like folks in person are at that point. They're all back. Welcome back. Alrighty, so what do folks think of peers, family, school, and the media? Which do you think has the greatest influence on your gender identity, your sexual identity, things along those lines? And again, folks in Zoom, feel free to either unmute or write it out in the chat. What do y'all think? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, especially now the vast majority of us can access the internet, right? At least some of the time, right? you might get knowledge there you're not getting anyplace else, right? And that may be good or bad depending on the media you're seeking out. There are obviously some really great educational resources out there online, but there are also some really messed up ideas if you find yourself in, sort of the incel part of the internet, right? About sexual identity and things along those lines. Lorraine is saying school and the media, and Sydney's saying school for sure. Yeah, so if you two don't mind sharing why you think it's school, but folks in person, if you don't mind sharing why you might think school would be a really important influence as well here. Melissa says, I definitely think the media has bigger influence, so echoing what y'all said. The media is always pushing acceptance and therefore allowing people to feel more comfortably. Yeah, that's really important, right? Even when I was growing up, so like in the 90s, Ellen DeGeneres had her sitcom and came out, and it was like she was immediately blackballed. Like it was a huge deal, and you just like didn't talk about stuff like that. So, in 20 years, we've made huge strides. Not that it's perfect by any way, shape, or form, right? But yeah, I think that's a piece of it. But yeah, let's bounce around with this idea about school. Why would school be really influential?
Said you spend more time at school than you do at home.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Thanks, Lorraine. And especially in high school, oh yeah, everyone's going through puberty. Those are the people you spend all your time with, right? Yeah, middle school, high school. I don't know about y'all, but my middle school experience was just not great, right? Like I remember friend groups fighting with each other about stupid stuff, right? And a lot of that is just, you're going through a lot of change, both hormonally and socially. So you're trying to like wrap your head around that. Yeah, and I think for some people too, it's like school might be the only place you get anything about sex ed, right? Depending on how open your parents are. I have a weird situation and fully acknowledge that most people did not have this experience. My mother was an elementary school teacher. So when I was, starting to ask like, where do babies come from? Her solution was we went and checked a bunch of books out of the library and we sat and we read them together. And my dad came home and I was like, guess what, Dad? The sperm joined with the egg, and that's how babies made. And he was like, oh, okay, that's where we went today. But I know that a lot of parents don't feel comfortable doing that, right? And may have explained it more with like metaphors or things along those lines. So it took me a minute as a teen to realize not everyone had that experience, because to me, obviously, that was what's normal. And Sydney's also saying, so your friends have a huge impact on your confidence to be who you are, especially. You have so many people around you with different point of views. Yeah, I think that this is a huge, huge thing. If you have people who are accepting and supportive of your gender identity, your sexual identity, right, you're much more likely to feel open and free to express who you really are rather than conforming to something specifically. But if everyone in the town where you're from or the school where you're at is all like the same identity, it can be really hard to come out or just talk about being something else, or even like allow yourself to imagine you're something else, right? Yeah. What do we think about the idea that this might be different for people in different cultures? Melissa has something in the chat. It's different in other cultures because of what laws are in place. Yeah, and what's socially acceptable in the culture. It may be that a person can be queer, but would never be able to say anything in order to protect themselves, their family, their friends, their family honor, etc. Yeah, I mean, there are places still where being openly queer is punishable by death, right? Like it's horrifying. That being said, I think there are also other cultures that are more open and accepting than we are, right? We're just sort of like, oh yeah, that's a thing that happens, it's cool. Again, I think I might have mentioned this previously, but I think of like indigenous peoples and how they often had a concept of being trans or gender fluid. And North American culture, Native cultures, the term that's been used is two-spirit, although certainly within each language it's different, right? And so then those might be much more accepting. And in fact, in some of those cultures, if you were someone who was genderqueer, you would be have elevated status. You were seen as like a shaman or some other religious figure, or often like a medicine person, things along those lines. Yeah, so I think it can really matter to the cultures as well. And that's true of subcultures too, right? I've certainly had students who've come out to me and talked about how supportive their family is. And I remember one student, it was like heartbreaking, where like that student actually had to leave Wesleyan because when they came out, their family stopped paying their tuition. And he was so funny. He was like, I bedazzle everything. How did they not know? Like at least he had a sense of humor about it. But it was obviously heartbreaking for him. And he found another place to go and, still got his education. But it can be really tricky in some households. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so our next one here. Our textbook talks about that sexual socialization, so how we learn about sex and how we learn about relationships, takes different forms in males and females. So why do you think our societal norms encourage females to feel guilty about engaging in sex? And do you think that there's this double standard regarding sexual activity still today, where like, if a guy has a lot of sex, he's a player, but if a woman has a lot of sex, she's a slut? All right, I'm gonna throw on our breakout rooms again, and folks in person can chat among yourselves. And folks in the back, the three of you can take a group and chat too. Alrighty, I'm gonna bring back our Zoom folks and we can chat through this one. All right, thanks Zoom folks. And I'm realizing that folks in person may be able to talk more quickly. So thanks for hanging in with our sort of schedule over here. So what do we think? Why do we encourage female, women, girls to feel guilty about sex? Yeah.
I think that the society kind of makes women feel guilty because they say that we need to be more pure and more innocent. So instead of that, also the ones that can get pregnant. So I feel like there's like a negative look on that.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, that yeah, the women are seen or people with uteruses, I should say, are seen entirely as responsible for any pregnancy, when in fact we know 0% of pregnancies happen without some sperm in the mix, right? So it has to be someone who has testes who contributes to the pregnancy. But yeah, I think that because it's a lot easier to say, oh, you're pregnant, where it's harder to tell who's the father immediately, right? Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Sid says the whole thing about cherishing our bodies, we shouldn't allow ourselves to be available to others. Yeah, the idea that this is some sort of like gift. I don't know that we want to say men suck, but mad respect to our men in the room. But yeah, the whole idea that women have to be good, right? And this varies from culture to culture and religion to religion, right? So for example, in very fundamentalist sects of not sex, but SCCT, I really just need to clarify right now, but of any religion, oftentimes there's a lot of control over women's bodies, what they can dress like, who they can talk to, things along those lines. Whereas in more liberal branches of those religions, those same religions, that might not be the case, right? So yeah, I think that that's a big piece of it as well, the sort of moral and religious statement about things. And this obviously gets like tied into things about birth control and abortion and those things as well. Melissa's saying, I honestly feel it's because women are held to the standard of being pure and innocent. Yeah, the white wedding dress, right? It's supposed to be a representation of that. Only for one man, their future husband. Sexual activity could lead to pregnancy. Having a child is a big responsibility. As someone with a child myself, I will say that. Yes. And on top of that, our bodies become different, not like the ones that are desirable and feminine. Very true. This is a good point, that when we give birth and when we're pregnant, right, our bodies are not going to necessarily meet that ideal. And in fact, my like least favorite example of this is, I believe it was after Kate Middleton had their first child. She was literally like the day after coming out of the hospital. I don't even think it had been 24 hours. And the media was like, why is she still fat? And it was like, your body doesn't just like immediately go poof after you have a baby, right? Like there's still fluid and stuff. Your uterus is still contracting back into shape for sometimes a week afterwards, but just like the ignorance of people thinking that like you are going to always like immediately bounce back, right? And I think this is one of the reasons why celebrity women often sort of like hide for the last part of their pregnancy. I think that's been changing in recent years. I think about Natalie Portman accepting her Oscar pregnant, right, which was awesome. But certainly we see that. And then Lorraine is saying it's like the ladylike thing, yes. So we have to act a certain way and not do something that isn't ladylike. This goes back to the video we watched on Friday, right, about how like women sit certain ways. I mean, as much as I enjoy this movie in its own way, right? Thinking about the Princess Diaries and how like she's taught to sit in certain ways and wave in certain ways, right? And all those are being ladylike and things along those lines. All right, does this double standard still exist for men and women in terms of number of sexual partners? I think that's called body count now, right? Which sounds really disturbing out of context. Or just behaviors, who's allowed to be overtly sexual, who's not. Okay, a lot of yeses, okay. I remember I had a very well-meaning student who took one of my gender and women's studies seminars. And she was like, no, this is gone, everything's equal. And I was like, okay, but is there an orgasm gap? And she was like, oh. Like, oh yeah. But yeah, what is the double standard still? Who's allowed to be more open and expressive and have that higher body count? Men, yeah. And then women are supposed to not have that many.
It's so sensitive. I tell you, I got 3 bodies, but you got 20. You finna cry, cause I don't got 3 bodies. It's not fair, like, how you gonna be mad at me, cause I don't got this little bit of body.
Right.
You around here putting your thing in everything you see.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah. And this has been around for a really long time. I mean, I hope this is not still the case, but it used to be that like when men came of age, their fathers would like take them to brothels, right? And they were expected to go out and like sexually experiment. Even back in the 1800s, but women were supposed to be pure and chaste and wait for marriage. I'm sure there are still fathers who do that with their sons, but I hope not as commonly, if that makes sense. But yeah, the idea that, and I think that relates to a lot of the stuff we were just talking about again, right? Like the idea that women can get pregnant and things along those lines. Yeah, okay, so let's stop there for today, just because I want to give us adequate time to talk about all the questions. So we'll keep popping up with this on Wednesday. Geez, it's Monday. I should know better. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and pass out the exams to folks in class. So go ahead and end the Zoom. And y'all all have the exams in class on Wednesday too. So